There comes a moment in every leader's life when the career that once defined them begins to loosen its grip. A moment when the pace softens, the noise quietens, and the horizon stretches beyond the role that held so much of their identity. And in that moment, a quiet fear often appears. Will my life still feel full when the work is no longer the center of it? Most leaders assume that they'll make it through the big years intact. The rest will sort itself out, that their relationship will still be there, that their identity will naturally reform, and that meaning will just appear. That longevity, like real longevity, is something that happens if you're lucky. But here's the truth. Longevity is not luck. Longevity is intention. It's the life you design while you're leading and the life that still holds you when the leading is done. Welcome back to the Leadership Longevity Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Hughes, and we're deep in Survivor Driver 4, Legacy and Freedom, the legacy distortion pattern and the final driver of the leadership longevity ecosystem. Survivor Driver 1 overwhelms you, number 2 accelerates you, number 3 destabilizes you, but Survivor Driver 4 does something different. It disconnects you. It disconnects you from meaning, it disconnects you from continuity, from the imprint you're already making. It disconnects you from the truth that your leadership is already living inside other people. In Myth 11, that disconnection showed up as postponing legacy. In Myth 12, it shows up as diminishing your agency, believing that longevity just happens and that connection is optional. But here's the regenerative truth. When the legacy layer is restored, it expands you. It expands your identity beyond the role. It expands your time horizon beyond the quarter, and it expands your relational field beyond your team. It also expands your sense of freedom because your value no longer lives inside your output. The survival driver disconnects you, though. The regenerative principle expands you. And in Myth 12, here is where that expansion becomes liberation. The myth of luck tells you, if I work hard enough, if I survive long enough, if I'm lucky enough, the rest of my life will just fall into place. It tells you connection is optional. It tells you relationships will wait. It tells you identity will rebuild itself. It tells you freedom arrives automatically once the work is over. But here's the truth. Nothing about longevity is accidental. Not your relationships, not your identity, not your meaning, not your freedom. Longevity is designed through intention, through connection, through agency, through the ecosystem you build long before you actually need it. So most leaders don't fear failure so much, they fear the after. They fear waking up one day with a successful career behind them and a life that feels too small to hold who they've become. They fear realizing they poured everything into work and left too little for themselves, too little for their relationships, too little for the life that comes after the role. They fear that the identity that has made them successful won't know how to exist without the structure of work. And beneath it all, they fear that if they haven't been intentional, if they haven't built the relationships, the rhythms, the meaning, and the ecosystem, then the after will feel like a cliff instead of a continuation. This is the fracture of Myth 12, the belief that longevity is something you inherit instead of something you design. This myth, of course, is very seductive because independence always feels efficient, admirable, safe, self-sufficient. Leaders are rewarded for being the one who holds it all together, the one who doesn't need help, the one who can carry more, the one who absorbs the pressure so others don't have to. Competence becomes armor. Reliability becomes identity, and self-containment becomes pride. Silence becomes protection, and slowly, quietly, invisibly, isolation becomes normal. Not chosen, not desired, just familiar. Independence feels like strength, but actually, it can be depletion in slow motion. Independence is not resilience. Independence is isolation dressed up as strength. And isolation is the enemy of longevity. So there's a leader, of course, and we've met versions of them before everywhere, standing at the threshold between the career they built and the life that comes after it. From this moment, two futures can unfold. Path 1, the life built by drift. In this future, the leader keeps doing what they've always done, carrying everything alone, postponing connection, prioritizing work over relationships, assuming that after will sort itself out, believing that longevity is something that happens if you're lucky. And when the role eventually ends, and all roles do, they step into a life that feels too quiet for the person they've become. The days are spacious, but their relationships are thin. The calendar is empty, but their identity is unanchored. Their freedom is real, but it feels like exile. They didn't fail. They simply never designed what would hold them once the work no longer did. This is a life built by drift. The second path is the life built by intention. In this future, the leader makes a different choice. They begin tending to the relationships that nourish them. They build rhythms that sustain them. They invest in the people who will walk with them long after the role is gone. They design a life that can hold their leadership and a leadership that doesn't consume their life. And when the role eventually ends, they step into a life that feels full, held, and deeply alive. Their relationships are strong, their identity is grounded, and their days are meaningful. Their freedom feels like expansion, not emptiness. They didn't get lucky, they got intentional. And this is the life built by design. And here's the part I want you to really hear. No matter what path you recognize within yourself, whether you've been drifting or whether you've already begun designing, you can always choose again. Longevity is not fixed, it's not predetermined, and it's not something you do or don't have. It's something you can redesign at any moment you decide to act with intention. You can rebuild connection, you can restore rhythm, and you can strengthen the relationships that hold you. You can create a life that feels like continuation, not a cliff. The path is not chosen once, it's chosen over and over through small, deliberate acts of agency. You are never too late to design the life that will hold you long after the work is done. When we look at the science, something important becomes clear. Longevity isn't a personality trait. It's a relational and biological systems state. So once you understand that, the myth of luck dissolves instantly. Let me walk you through the key pieces. So leadership is relational. So the longest running study on human life satisfaction and longevity, with more than 85 years of data through Harvard, has found one conclusion that eclipses all others. The quality of your relationships is a stronger predictor of your long-term health and happiness. Not achievement, not status, not income, not even physical health markers in midlife. Although I have a whole other story about that we've told earlier in this season. Relationships, warm, supportive connection protects your nervous system, reduces chronic stress, and creates biological conditions for long, healthy, meaningful life. 8 decades of evidence all point to the same truth. Connection is longevity. So loneliness. Loneliness is a biological stress state, not a personal failing. It's the feeling of being unheld. It is not an emotional inconvenience. It's a physiological stress state. So, research shows that loneliness increases inflammation, elevates cortisol, impairs sleep and cognition, accelerates burnout, and raises mortality rates or mortality risk at rates comparable to smoking. This is because loneliness increases that allostatic load we spoke about again so early in the season, the wear and tear on your body from carrying stress alone. So loneliness is not about being alone, it's about being unsupported. And connection is the antidote. So relational neuroscience shows that when we feel connected, our brain works better. Connection increases creativity, clarity, courage, emotional regulation, problem solving, perspective. And that's why leaders often have their best ideas in conversation, not isolation. And I know this is absolutely true for me. Connection doesn't just help you last, it helps you lead better. It expands your cognitive bandwidth and reduces the mental load that comes from carrying everything alone. Stepping out of a big role too creates a natural identity wobble. So your sense of self becomes more fluid, more permeable, more in need of reflection and anchoring. So without relational scaffolding, people reflect you back to yourself. People who hold continuity with you. Identity can collapse or fragment. This is why some leaders feel lost when the role ends, even if they were ready. It's not a failure of character, it's just a lack of relational architecture. Connection is what allows identity to transmission without breaking. So if we zoom out beyond psychology and neuroscience, ecology tells us the same story. In nature, nothing survives alone. The most resilient systems, forests, reefs, grasslands, aren't held together by strength. They're held together by interdependence. Trees share nutrients through underground networks. Coral species co-regulate each other's stress, and grasslands distribute load across diversity. Everything thrives because everything is connected. Your longevity works in the same way. This is not luck, it's not accident, it's the ecosystem you build, the relationships, the support, the interdependence that carries you into the life beyond the role. Longevity isn't luck, it's intention. It's the architecture you build through connection, through rhythm, through identity, through legacy, through agency. It's a life that holds you after the work is done. You don't last because you're strong, you last because you're supported. Support is not a weakness, it's a strategy. Connection is not optional, it's the architecture of your future. This last week, for your tiny experiment, reach out to one person you want in your after. Not for advice, not for strategy, for connection. Let yourself feel what changes. Then for reflection, perhaps consider, what life am I designing for the years after the role? And who do I want beside me when I get there? And finally, for your ecosystem practice, choose one relationship and make it a rhythm. A monthly coffee, a fortnightly walk, a weekly check-in. Longevity is built in the cadence of connection. You don't need luck, you need intention. You've reached the end of the 12-myth journey. You've dismantled the distortions that kept you over-functioning, isolated, and quietly burning out. You've rebuilt your leadership from the inside out, and now you're standing at the threshold, the moment where the myths fall away and the new era begins. This is the beginning of a life designed with intention, held by connection and anchored in freedom.